back to Marlene and Friends in service for a healthy world for humans and non-humans alike. My guest today is the fantastic Jeff Nelson, creator of the hugely popular website and YouTube channel VegSource. Both are an absolute Klondike of information, loaded with videos and blogs. In fact, everything you really need is in there for living a long, happy, healthy life. Jeff, a big warm welcome to you.
Thanks, Marlene. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of you and Bill, so it's a real privilege to be able to talk to you like this.
Well, you're one of our favorite people on the planet. You do incredible work, and you may not know this, but you are known in the vegan community, Mr. Nelson, as the investigative journalist, owning your story and what we all believe, what we have experienced in our own lives, and like you and Sabrina and your family, you know, Bill and I, we speak our truth every day, and, you know, we believe that the world needs a revolution of the heart. Would you agree, Jeff?
I think so, yeah. That's really what it comes down to.
Well, you know, as co-founder of VegSource with your wife, Sabrina, you're actually going to share your story with my viewers today on how you discovered the path to true health. So I'm going to hand over to you to get your slides up and running.
Well, I mean, I just want to tell you before I go to the slides that sort of how we got into this is that we read a book in 1990 by John Robbins. You probably know John Robbins, yeah. Food Revolution and so on. And the book was called Diet for a New America. I'd heard him on the radio. I went out and bought the book, read it, and I thought, wow, this really makes sense. And I went vegetarian at that time, and I gave it to my wife, who wasn't yet married to me, but she was my girlfriend. She read it, and it's kind of the health arguments appealed to me, the animal arguments appealed to her. She had raised chickens as a child and had pets, and they all had names and personalities, and they waited until she came home from school to lay their egg. And when she read Diet for a New America, she always thought, oh, the chickens we eat, they're very different from the chickens that I had as my pets. But then there was like a connection, like, no, they're exactly the same. They just have a terrible life. And so that made her go vegetarian. Then about 5 years later, she started having a medical problem. Her ears got all blistering, like she had a terrible sunburn. It was quite painful. She bounced around to different doctors and ended up in the office of a rheumatologist, a guy in Beverly Hills called Rodney Bluestone, Dr. Bluestone. And he diagnosed her with a rare autoimmune disease called relapsing polychondritis. And this is where your immune system attacks the cartilage in your body, and you've got cartilage in your ears, in your nose, in your throat, around your heart, and it destroys it. It's very painful. There's nothing they can do for it. They don't know what causes it. They can just treat the symptoms with steroids and different, very powerful drugs. So she suffered with that for about a year and had repeated flare-ups and relapses, and she'd have to sort of go to bed for a few days and take heavy medications. Someone had given her a book by Dr. John McDougall, who I know is a friend of yours. You've had him on your show here. And in this book, he talked about autoimmune diseases and lupus and how dairy proteins can, wreak havoc and arthritis and so on. So she read this and she said was really because her relapsing polychondritis is in the lupus family. So she came downstairs and she said, that's it. I'm going to do this diet. I'm going to go vegan and see what happens. So I was sort of, well, okay, well, if you're going vegan, then, I guess we're vegan. So about 2 weeks later, after starting McDougall's diet, she went back to the rheumatologist. And for the first time in a year, her SED rate was normal. Normally, it was below 5 when it had been above 50. And the anti-nuclear antibodies, which is an indirect measure of how the disease, is active, were not present. So she went back every month, and after 3 months of getting these same results and having no flare-ups, Dr. Bluestone said, you're in remission. Wow. And he was this English guy, actually. He said, and your dietary strategy is working, he said, because her cholesterol was 135 or something. So that was 25 years ago. And you asked, why did we start VegSource? It was sort of our form of kitchen activism. We felt like Sabrina had dodged a bullet. This is a disease where I think 40% of people who got the diagnosis that she got are dead within 10 years. It's more deadly than breast cancer. Wow. So we felt like, geez, we got this information. We're very lucky. And it saved, my children have a mom today they could have lost if we hadn't gotten this information. And so we went on the internet. This was 96, I guess. And there wasn't really that much. There were some vegetarian, vegan websites and so on. And so we just decided, as I say, as our form of kitchen activism, to get out and tell our story, and then to try and find these people that were using the same kind of message of using diet to, dramatically improve people's health. And we reached out to, and we met Dr. McDougall and Neil Bernard and, so many other medical doctors and dietitians and chefs and animal rights people. And we built websites for them. We built John McDougall's first website. We built PCRM's first website, Farm Sanctuary for Gene Bauer. That's what we did, and we hosted. And so that's sort of how we got into it. We realized there's so many great reasons to do this. And as you know, when you get in it, you start to see all the different reasons, how it really aligns and makes sense. So that was our story. That's how we, 24 years ago, Sabrina had her life saved and our family's, quality of life improved. And then in so many ways since then, it's touched people in my family. But I wanted to give a little presentation here for you today, which is the slides. And I wanted to show how perhaps to some degree, and maybe a very significant degree, a Scotsman is responsible for the obesity problem and the many chronic diseases and health problems people have around the world. It's Scotland's fault. So let me start my little screen thing here. And this is my great-great-grandfather. Is it coming through? Can you see it?
Yeah, perfect. That's great, Jeff. Super.
And H.O. is Herman Oshin. He went by H.O. And his great-great-grandfather came to the United States in the 1700s. And so this is a story of how these Scottish descendants got us all sick. And to understand it, we have to go to this pivotal event in April of 1865. This was the Civil War, and this was the Battle of Five Forks, which is a very important moment in why people are so sick. Look at the guy in the foreground here. You see he's holding this something up to his, it looks like a phone. Yep, iPhone 10. See, he's on the phone there. No, I'm kidding. But the other thing I see from this picture is look how thin and trim all these soldiers are. These are guys in their 20s and 30s probably. Now, granted, they're probably suffering the deprivations of war, so they're not eating as much maybe as they might. But look, compare that to today's military and what people look like, and it's a very different thing. Soldiers using liposuction to meet fitness standards. Okay, I'm sidetracking here, but back to the Battle of Five Forks. My presentation here is to give you the history of modern food era and why people eat the way they do today. Again, my great-great-grandfather of good Scottish stock, he was the seventh of 8 children. He grew up on a farm in upstate New York, a little town called Stockbridge, and Stockbridge literally means a bridge where livestock cross, so this is where animal food, cross, a stock bridge. So H.O.'s parents were hog farmers, and all of the kids learned from a very young age how to slaughter, dress, preserve, and sell hog meat because they're hog farmers. So this was H.O.'s brother, Philip Danforth. He went by P.D. And when P.D. was 19 years old, he fell in love with a beautiful local girl named Grace. And he once told Grace that 3 of his friends were thinking of going to California, this is 1851, because there was a gold rush going on and people were getting rich. And Grace said to PD, hey, you should go, you should make your fortune, and then come back and buy me the biggest farm in Stockbridge. So that night, PD went home and told his parents, I'm going to California. They tried to dissuade him, but he's a determined guy. They gave him a few $100s, which was, a good amount of money. And he and his 3 friends set out walking for California from New York. They walked all the way to Missouri, and then PD bought a team of oxen and a cart for the rest of the trip. But something tragic happened. One of the 4 men was killed. And so they buried him, and that kind of put a damper on the trip to have a 20-year-old kid die, one of their friends. And the other 2 guys, I think they were Matthew and Bernard, they decided they were going to quit and they were going to go back to New York. But PD was determined. He wanted to go on, even if he had to go alone, to California. So he sat down and he wrote a letter to Grace, and he asked his friend Matthew, take this letter when you get back to New York and give it to Grace so she knows, what I'm doing and what my plan is. Now, PD got to California. It took him 6 months from New York to get to California. He got to Placerville, which was the center kind of the gold rush area. But when he got there, he realized he was a couple years late because the gold rush was really 1849. And by the time he got there were all kinds of busted miners and bankrupt people and people who had gone to make their fortunes like him. But, there were no fortunes to be made. There was already taken. There was a lot of crime in Placerville, and they called it Hangtown because if you stole anything, you were hanged. That was the penalty. And so one of the things PD noticed is that all of these mines had this thing called a sluice. And a sluice is where you divert water from a river and bring it over to where the mine opens in order to separate the mud and the dirt from the ore. And PD had an idea to make a company that would go out and build sluices, that he saw all these unemployed people. He brought them together and hired them, and he made a company that, oh, there goes a train, that makes sluices for the mines. These are pictures actually from the 1800s. And in the end of 5 years, PD had managed to save $8,000.
Wow.
$8,000, that was a lot of money in 1856. You can go online and you can see that in today's dollars, $8,000 is between $231,000 and $35 million relative to the share of GDP. So PD decided, okay, it's time to go back to New York, go to Grace, buy the farm, and and start my life. When he got back to New York, he found that Grace had married someone else. And in fact, Grace had married Matthew, the guy who he'd asked to bring the letter back to her. So that's life. PD was disillusioned and he moved to Milwaukee where he had met people, and he went into a business that he knew something about, which is the pig slaughtering business. And specifically, he and his partner produced pork barrels. And a pork barrel is literally a barrel of salted pork. There was no refrigeration. And this was an important thing. In the Old West, people would stock up with pork barrels and ride down the Mississippi. They'd have plenty of food. And when the Civil War came, they made a lot of money supplying the Northern Army with pork barrels. Okay, in the winter of 1864, PD traveled to meet with my great-great-grandfather, H.O. H.O. was living in Chicago. He was a grain trader and very successful. And PD had an idea. He had a scheme, really. And he felt that the Civil War was going to be over in the spring of 1865. The South was losing, and he wanted to go make a contract with the Northern Army where he would promise to deliver 120,000 pork barrels in May of 1865. Now, he didn't have anything like that amount of pork barrels, but he thought the war would be over, the price would fall out on pork barrels and go down. They'd be able to buy lots of pork barrels and sell them and make a big profit. And I don't think I told you the last name of my great-great-grandfather and his brother. It was Armour. That's their last name. You may not know in Scotland, but in the US, the Armour Meat Company was to become the biggest food company in the United States at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. And this is the story of how they created this company. Back to the Battle of Five Forks, these are all prisoners. All these people lined up here are Confederate soldiers who had been captured in this battle, 4,000 of them. And it was just 8 days later that General Lee, Robert Lee, surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant after the Battle of Appomattox. And what happened when the Civil War was over? The price of pork barrels dropped. In fact, they dropped from $42 per barrel to $18. So my great-great-grandfather and his brother insisted that the government honor their contract. They went and bought a lot of pork barrels at $18. They sold them to the government, and they netted a profit of $2.5 million. In 1865, that was a lot of money. And when you go look on the websites that tell you it could be as much as $4.5 billion in terms of a share of gross domestic product. And this could have gone wrong. Had they bet the wrong way and the war wasn't over and they were supposed to deliver 120,000 pork barrels, they could have been jailed. It would have been fraud. But there's a great quote by Honoré de Balzac that I like: "The secret of a great success for which you are at a loss to account is a crime that has never been found out because it was properly executed. So another way to say that is behind every great fortune lies a crime. But this was the fortune that they got in sort of a war profiteering, Halliburton fashion. And they used it to create this massive company in Chicago. They built the stockyards. They used the train system to bring in cattle, entire herds from the West that could be slaughtered in an afternoon. They pioneered, many people think that Henry Ford pioneered the assembly line with Model T, but that's not true. Henry Ford came to the armors to learn about the assembly line because this is what the armors created in their meatpacking business. You probably should call it a disassembly line because they were taking animals apart. They weren't assembling anything. But they came up with these practices where maximum efficiency, the maximum speed, the minimum amount of skill required on the part of the workers. This was the beginning of the modern industrialized food system, mass system of production. They pioneered things like division of labor, mass production, continuous flow, standardization of units of production, and so on. They were friends with Thomas Edison, who brought his movie camera down and took movies of their operations. Let's see if I can get this one to play here. My movies aren't working. I don't know why. Anyhow, Thomas Edison took movies. They had electric trains. They had thousands of head of cattle coming off these trains that they brought in to slaughter. They had all kinds of ways that they used it. They had a saying that they used everything but the squeal. And so they used animal parts to make string, to make furniture padding, lard, pharmaceuticals, soap, and probably their biggest asset was the refrigerated train car. And during their height, they had 12,000 of these, and it allowed them to take meat and ship it anywhere in the country that they wanted. And they used this sort of as a monopolization technique where they would go and drop the price, drive all the local butchers out of business, and then they'd control the market. And in fact, there were laws, antitrust laws passed in the 1890s to stop this kind of predatory capitalism, monopolistic stuff. And the armors were indicted for violations of the Sherman Act Trust based on their testimony that they gave to Congress about their business practices, they and some of the other meat packers. And they were indicted, but they got a very skilled lawyer who argued that they should be able to invoke their Fifth Amendment, not to incriminate themselves retroactively. And here's an article from the New York Times, Armor Wants an Immunity Bath, and it talks about that they're going to argue, that they could get immunity retroactively. And in fact, the judge bought the argument and dismissed the case. So they got away with it. And because of these thrifty, two very, driven Scottish businessmen, today we have 49-cent hamburgers and 69-cent cheeseburgers available. We have the average person can be as well fed and portly as aristocrats or wealthy bankers could afford to be in the old days. So I think my Scottish ancestors have some of the responsibility for getting us into this situation where we have all this highly processed food churned out that's making everybody just really sick.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating looking back at history, Jeff, because that was such a very, graphic way, but in an educational format, to let people see where did it all start, Yeah. So now, obviously, Bill, my husband, is American, so we have, if he says to me about Scottish, I'm like, the Americans, they started it with the fast food industry.
It's true.
Your story, exactly where your stories come from is true. It's now we look at the cheap food, the processed food. And that brings me to, I want to ask you, I've got many questions, but, Jeff, I know you believe like we do that most people aspire to have a peaceful and harmonious life, right? And, the biggest threats are the pandemics, the climate catastrophe. And these are very real threats that they can be prevented by changing from an animal-based agriculture world to a plant-based agriculture and changing all the meat and the dairy processing industries and start producing plant-based foods. So I want to ask you, Jeff Nelson, with all this information, why are people not switching over to a vegan diet?
Well, I mean, that's a tough one to answer. I mean, I think when I look back to where we were 20 years ago, and we've been in this for a while, like you, trying to help spread the word and educate people in different ways. And I do think there is an increase. I think there's a lot going on nowadays, especially with films like Game Changers, Forks Over Knives, things that are coming out and that are resonating with a lot of people. So, I mean, I'm a little more optimistic. I do think that there's a fair amount of positive change out there. It's always, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of thing. But I don't know when we're going to reach a critical mass where a lot of people kind of embrace it and understand. But I think we're moving in the right direction, and I think that there's people who are, improving. They're not necessarily going all the way. You don't necessarily have to go all the way. You can make a lot of big improvements along the way. But it comes down to information. Why do people eat the way they eat? Because their parents gave them food. So that's what they learn. Okay, my parents eat this way. Maybe their parents didn't have any education or information. They're just eating the way they were raised. And so most of us are, sort of locked into whatever we were raised. These are the comfort foods we like. These are the celebration foods we like. And there's not a lot of thought or intention or education that goes into it. But I find that when you plant seeds and people see things, kind of when you lead by example, people begin to respond, and maybe unconsciously at first, but people, like you say, they do want to be well. They do want to live in a world that's not burning down and heating up and having bad things happen. And it just takes time. You're ahead of the curve, but I know you're having an effect.
Yeah, and I think culturally as well, obviously, I'm not saying it is easier for you in America, but yeah, it is easier for you in America. Well, I just think there's obviously population-wise, it's much bigger. There's definitely a far healthier lifestyle aspect, especially in California and many even on the East Coast where we have a lot of students. It is. I'm not saying it's harder here because we work with people from around the world, but I'm encouraged in a very small way, but it's not moving fast enough for me. That's where I get really frustrated. Yeah. And I think probably like yourself, the vegan world is moving forward in a way, but to me it's moving forward in a way with all these fast processed foods hitting the market, particularly all the ones that are really highly processed, the fake meats and things. What are your opinion on that? What's your opinion on these?
Well, I don't eat that stuff generally. I'm not looking to eat vegan junk food, but if someone wants to eat really tasty fake burgers and, that aren't necessarily that healthy, I would rather there's no animals involved. I'd rather they eat something, may not be the healthiest, but at least there's no kind of suffering that went into it. So I support it in that respect. I think it's great to have, plant-based junk food over regular junk food. But I mean, I don't kid myself. That's not what someone should be making the focus, the foundation of their diet if they're concerned about their health, because that stuff, is just not that kind of food. So, I mean, I think it's good. I'm glad that stuff is happening and that I don't want people to think that, okay, this is what a healthy diet is because it's plant-based. Obviously, sometimes there's like a health halo around something. Oh, it's vegan or it's plant-based. No, that's not by any means a guarantee that it's the kind of food you should be eating. But, just from a cruelty standpoint and maybe from an environmental standpoint, that's a step in the right direction. That's an improvement. And for people that want to eat that kind of food, yeah, I would switch to the cruelty-free, more environmentally sustainable type.
Okay, great. I'm sort of with you in that. If it's not from an animal, fine. I'm a bit like you, Bill, and I. We don't eat that because we cook rice and beans and things. Jeff, what do you think we can do to introduce people to people with low income, right? I mean, introducing them to eating well, because I feel that that's something that's hugely important because it's the low income people that are suffering with all the disease.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the answer to that, probably, at least in my experience, is we got to care about those people in a genuine way.
Mhm.
And, I remember some friends who had a program they were doing where they're going into schools to try and teach, more better nutrition information to schools. They didn't have any kids in that school, so they're sort of coming from the outside to like give information. And I think that when people do have kids in the school, then it's like very appropriate for them to go in and work with the school. And in the same way, in low income areas, I do run a program called Meals for Health. It's all volunteer, and we involve, John McDougall and Rip Esselstyn and lots of different people, Dr. Clapper and so on. And we've gone into underserved areas. We went into a food bank in Sacramento when we ran a program. We went into an African-American church up in the Bay Area and the Oakland area. And we went in with a program where we didn't call it vegetarian or vegan. It was just a health program. We sold the weight loss and the getting off medications and so on. And we went in, and it was an amazing experience. We had like a 3-day, all-day seminar that we gave with all these different, people coming in to give their talks. And I think that they were skeptical in the beginning, and we weren't sure, people relying on a food bank, are they going to follow through? We were giving free food with the program, so that might have been why some people, signed up. But these were all really intelligent people who were, kind of understood at the end of the weekend, wow, this could be profound. And we tracked them. We had doctors who, monitored them, gave them a physical at the beginning and the end, and they made incredible benefits. They lost weight, they got off their blood pressure medication, they reversed their type 2 diabetes. I mean, this was really happening with these groups of people. And today we've had follow-ups of Don Forrester. I don't know if you know Dr. Forrester, he's a doctor here in Northern California. Keeps in touch with people and goes back every year. And there's still, 85% of them are still following the program. They identify themselves as vegans. We didn't say you're vegan, they said we're vegan. And when somebody's been on medication for 20 years and told they're going to be on it the rest of their life, and then you prove it to them, you help them change their diet and give them support and education, and then they get off that medication and their numbers all come down. I mean, they've sold themselves. You don't have to like preach to them. One of the things that we did when we did these programs, we wanted to do a study. So we went to University of California, Berkeley, and we found someone in the nutrition department because we needed to like hire someone who could help us design the study and make it formally, whatever. And we ended up not doing it because it would have been very expensive. But when we got our results and I shared it with this researcher, she was like, wow, we have never seen this kind of compliance. We've never seen these kind of results. And I think there were two things at play. One is it works, the diet works. If people do it and they stick with it, they're going to get well or make big improvements. And the other thing is the personal, we went in there and we got to know these people and we liked these people and we had relationships, friendships with these people. And they knew that we wanted them, we weren't doing it for us or to preach or whatever. We were doing it just to kind of give them something. Yeah. And it changed their lives and it changed our lives. It really was like, wow, when you go in and you help people, it changes you. It doesn't just change them. Yeah. So I think that the answer to the question, how do you spread this message in low income and people where there's so much need, where they've got, food deserts where they live, where they can't get good food, easily or inexpensively. There are ways to do it. There's a program called WIC, Women, Infants and Children or something like that, which is a government run program. And some of these people at the food bank were saying, oh, I can just go to WIC and I can get beans for 31 cents a pound. I can get rice, I can get, potatoes, so all the sort of basic healthy foods. They're able to tell other people, you can get this really cheap. So, I mean, I don't know what the overall answer is. I know that the answer is teaching nutrition and a program like, Meals for Health that we take into these areas is incredibly effective, but we're always sort of invited in. There's always someone on the inside who sees what we're doing and says, wow, we need this in our church. And so there's like an acceptance and an openness and a, curiosity about it. Whereas if we just came in and, oh, we're going to tell you how to do this, we might not get the same reception. So, it's marketing and really caring about those people and their health is a key.
That's fantastic. It's so heartwarming, you know, because as you say, you're not only giving to these people, it's heartwarming for yourself. Because when I do
Yeah.
health counselling, Jeff, if I have a woman with breast cancer or a man with prostate cancer, you know, Bill and I do a lot of health counselling. We look at these people and think that could be us, right? We are so blessed that we have, you know, the it's a gift almost. You must feel the same, of course you do with Sabrina, that we consider ourselves so fortunate to teach. It's our passion to teach and share this
Yeah.
work because it has brought us the most incredible health, unlimited energy, you know, and every day there's new possibilities, as you say, to help someone else. You know, Bill's not far off 80. He's like a boy. You know, next week I'm 63. We cycle, we bike, you know, we don't even have a sneeze. So we want that for everybody, right? And I
Right.
know you and
Absolutely.
Sabrina do too. It's like, you know, how else can we do this? And I often say, if I didn't have to pay the rent, I would go out and do this every day for free, you know?
It's true.
Um,
It's true. You know what? I was just looking at my slide thing here. And let me try, if I may, just to
yeah,
see if I can do this. This is another video, but do you see it there?
yeah, fantastic.
This was one of the
Oh, that's
people
your program. How wonderful.
the food bank.
I started having high blood pressure when I was in my 40s. And since then, it was always high, but as I've gotten older, it was getting higher. And so my doctors were monitoring me. And I had been on that blood pressure medicine for over 22 years. This program done something for me that the medical industry couldn't do for me. This program done something for me in 4 days. 4 days, I was off of my blood pressure medicine. You know? So when I started it, and 4 days, we started April the 8th. April the 12th was my doctor's appointment. And I went in there and she took my blood pressure because it had been running like 160 over 104 and it was going up and they had upped my medication. And then when I started this vegan program, it went down, it was 123 over 78. And she says, oh, I think that the medicine that the doctor gave you is working. I go like, no, it's the food. And it really was the food, you know? I mean, I just...
Anyhow, that's just, we have so many stories like that of people who their eyes are open, you know, that, geez, with food, why do I need these doctors when I can do it with food, you know?
Exactly.
So,
it's just fantastic. Sure. It's so heartwarming, you know, and I'm so proud to call you my friend when you're out doing that amazing work in the world, Jeff. It's just wonderful. And that's what the world needs, as we said at the beginning of the interview, the world needs a revolution of the heart. Everybody, we've got to take care of each other. And we always say, how can we have a healthy world with so many sick people? We need healthy humans to have a healthy world.
That's it. That's it. I mean, even with the COVID that's going on now everywhere, I guess it's ending, hopefully, knock on wood and here and there. And hopefully it's run its course, but we'll see. But it picks on the people, you know, who don't have this kind of information, people who don't, you know, aren't riding their bikes like you are, or aren't aware and thinking about, okay, how can I maximize my health? And, you know, this is going to take me in the wrong direction. This can take me in a better direction. And when you go in the better direction, you're going to, if you get COVID, you know, you're probably going to be okay. Whereas the people that have all these comorbidities and problems caused by diet and not a good lifestyle, you know, they're the ones that are taking the beating.
Yeah.
So, on every level.
And you're absolutely right. And mental health, as you know, it's a huge problem. It's like, you know, for me, the whole process of dementia, it's like that's another out of control virus almost that's going around the world. The increase in dementia is huge. So for that in itself, to have cognitive health, happy, healthy, dead is how I like to look at life. You know, the whole body should age at the one time. And I always say to my clients and students, what you eat doesn't stop here. That's feeding your brain, you know. So, Jeff, one more thing I wanted to ask you. I mean, for us here, you know, in the UK, in Europe, maybe even in America, I don't know, we get contacted. There is still so much confusion around nutrition, and we know it's caused by, you know, the wheat bellies and the grain brains and all these books that come out and demonize, you know, carbohydrate, demonize the plants and demonize. So, how and just in a short sort of wording, I mean, I'm very Scottish and very direct, you know, but what can we do to close all that down? Because the word is what we teach, and you know, you've lived it, Sabrina, your family, the John McDougall's, the Colin Campbell's, these people are the pillars of the community in the health planet sector of the world. How can we not get them? That's why I started my series again, because we have to keep pushing all these amazing people out and crowd out all the nonsense and all the lies from the meat and dairy industry. And, you know, what do we do? How do we stop all this mass confusion? Because it's starting to grow again.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's a tough one. There's different forces at work. People are sick, they are overweight. So there's a desperation for, you know, solutions to that problem, and people offering a quick fix, even if it's not the best solution or it's an even unhealthy solution. You know, people are desperate, and, you know, they're going to spend their money where they're going to spend their money. So there's that aspect, as you say, the different, you know, diet styles that are out there that make promises and so on. And when they actually test them in unbiased scientific ways, they find out where, no, this is not the way to go. You know, this is going to increase your heart disease risk, or, you know, whatever it is. So there's that. And then there's the sort of commercial research. There's the science that's paid for by companies, by food companies, like you're talking about, the meat and the dairy industry. And, you know, John McDougall talks about a sort of turning point for this kind of science. In 1964, the US Surgeon General came out with a report called the Surgeon General's Report on Smoking. And in that report, it was like a landmark report that for the first time said, hey, smoking causes cancer, smoking is really problematic. You know, before that, doctors recommended this brand over that brand and so on. And the report was really devastating for the tobacco industry, because at that time, 50% of Americans smoked. Today, I think it's around 14%. But that was a time when many people decided, oh, okay, I'm not going to smoke anymore. So the tobacco industry really got hit hard. Then in the 1970s, there was a report on nutrition, a similar report done. It was called the McGovern Report. And they got the best research together, and they determined, hey, people need to eat more fruits and vegetables. They need to eat more starches, more unprocessed, less sugar, less meat and dairy. And they put this report together, and the food industry went ballistic. It was presented to Congress before it was published, and the food industry just, you know, lost their minds. They did not want to have happen to them what had happened to the tobacco industry, and, you know, have their sales go way down. So they went into overdrive, lobbying, hiring their own experts, and the thing was watered down, so that rather than say, you know, eat less butter, they said eat less saturated fat. Well, butter is 63% saturated fat, but they didn't want any foods mentioned in there because they didn't want to offend or hurt somebody's sales. So there was a whole political thing, which we know happens in government. They want to both promote business and help you sell more food, but they also want to protect people's health. So they're promoting a food that's going to hurt people's health. What do? You know, they get out of the way and let the food companies. And then starting in the 1980s, food companies began devoting a significant portion of their marketing budget to, you know, science, quote unquote, to studies, to hiring researchers to come up with studies about their food that, you know, show apparently it's healthy. And this is a very low quality of science usually. And there's a great book. There's a woman, Marion Nestle. You might know, she's the chair emeritus of nutrition at NYU. She's written a lot of books. What was that one?
Politics, maybe?
There's one called Unsavory Truth, How the Food Industry, you know, skews the science of what we eat, or something like that. And it's exactly about this. And she shows so many examples of how the food industry, you know, if you come to the food industry as a researcher and you give them a study that they wanted that result, they will hire you forever. If you go and your study doesn't show a benefit, you'll never work for them again. So that's the other side of it, is there's all this stuff that's in the media that comes out about this food and that food is conflicting. It may be low quality research, but people aren't, you know, don't have the time to kind of focus and really understand. So they're being bombarded, you know. And then the American Dietetic Association, that's our dietitian association, they say that there's no such thing as bad foods. Well, that's ridiculous. Of course there's bad foods. Yeah. I mean, you might maybe you only eat them when you're at the fair and it's, some
Yeah.
sugary fried, whatever. You're not going to eat that every day. That's a bad food. But this idea that they can't offend the food companies either because they're funded by these food companies. So, that's this huge conflict, makes it very hard for just honest, common sense,
Sure.
solid scientific research about what's healthy. And it's that your mom told you to eat your vegetables when you were a kid. Well, she was giving you good advice, and so it's tough out there. It's a tough landscape between commercial interests, people selling their quick fix weight loss that people want to buy. Everyone wants the quick fix.
Sure.
And then the truth getting out there as well.
Well, everybody's
I don't know what the answer is. The answer is kind of what you're doing, which is to educate people, to make videos, make your courses, and teach people, because then they go and teach other people.
And Bill and I always say, we share the planet with about 8 million other species, and we're the only one that doesn't know what to eat. Right?
That's right.
Every other species knows, that's my food. I recognize my food. We have badgers here just at the back door, and every night I slice some apples and I put them out for them. And now the wee family, they come in and have all their apples in the evening. It's just beautiful. We have some deer here at the back door as well, pheasants and all sorts. So we're very blessed to be in nature. Jeff, an absolute joy. I love and adore the truth that you share all the time with your endless work. You're a fantastic journalist. Your research is just incredible. And you introduced me also to Tim Raddock, who done great research on omega fats, and he's on my series next month.
Oh, great!
Yeah, he's doing great work. Him and his wife right now are doing a lot of the track and trace for COVID-19 in their county. So,
really? Oh, interesting.
So interesting.
He's a great guy, very smart, very sharp. I really like him. Well, you're doing great work, Marlene, in getting the word out, and you obviously have access to all these people, which is really great.
Yeah.
To be able to introduce them to your audience and help spread them around over there in the European theater. So I thank you and Bill for all your work over many years and continuing. So bravo, good job.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's been an absolute joy, and I look forward to sharing this fantastic Scottish interview with your HO to all my viewers. So enjoy the rest of your day in sunny California, and we'll speak again soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Marlene.